Alright, I did promise a follow-up video about these JRZ RS1 Tourings, and I've just finished the installation, so here it is. The setup was a lot more self-explanatory once you got into the whole install. There wasn't really a question of, you know, what needed to be done. Once you saw the parts and the mating parts that they connected to, it really wasn't a big deal. So front of the car was very well designed, except for one missing aspect on this particular vehicle. So on the side of the mount there, I don't know if you can see down there or not, there's a plastic clip and a hole for the plastic clip in the side of the strut. Now up above here where the stock strut had a second hole for a second clip to keep this wire away from the wheel, there was nothing there, so I added a tie strap and clipped it to the existing clip, and you know, I think that'll work fine, but it would have been nicer to have something like an additional ear here. It wouldn't have taken much, just a small piece of metal with a hole in it, but I get that adds expense, but you still have to deal with it when you put it on. So other than that, really nice. These are really easy to adjust. You loosen off this little nut here, or not a nut, this socket head cap screw. You loosen it off just enough so you can get the thing to turn. You turn it up or down to wherever you want it, and retighten it. It gives you torque specs for that particular screw. So again, front end, really nice. Sorry, there's the air compressor, but it uses the stock top mount up here. So you do have to take your stock strut apart and use that top bearing assembly and transfer it over to this this new strut. So that's the front. Most cars, I assume, will have a true coilover on the back. This car doesn't. And I think that's due to the design of the actual body. And I don't think this mount can take the full force of the car suspension. Therefore, you have a separate coilover assembly, spring assembly down here. So it's a two-part assembly, big spring on the bottom, an adapter piece. So this spring is a JRZ name on it. This spring up here actually has an Eibach name on it, so they're using Eibach parts for that. And then this is a big cup that sits on here. One of my initial concerns was that there wasn't going to be enough force on this to keep it from turning. After installing this, what a pain in the ass. There is definitely enough force on here. This thing isn't going to turn under normal circumstances. However, when installing this and adjusting this, it was well lubricated and everything, but when adjusting it down, even with the suspension in full droop, the threads it managed to pick up, and it locked this nut absolutely solid, and it's still in that state right now. I just happened to get lucky, and it locked up almost exactly where I needed it anyway. So, not the greatest. I mean, it is an aluminum part. It's an anodized aluminum part, so it's fairly hard, but the danger is there that it will lock up, especially in this suspension. When it's in full droop, there's still quite a bit of force on these springs to adjust. So I mean, the option is to take apart the suspension again and let it droop down for an adjustment, but when you're trying to balance the car out, you have the wheels on and off, it would be an awful long job. So the other side went absolutely fine. My recommendation is to well lubricate these, because the other side was well lubricated and it moved without a problem. The other issue ran into, you can probably see these scratches up here, is this thing would turn while you were trying to turn the nut, and there's no flats or any, it's just a round surface, so it's really difficult to try and hold on to that thing. Ended up using a strap wrench would probably work well. Didn't have one of those, so we used a a V-belt with a pry bar through it, and just wrap the V-belt around and cinch it up with the pry bar. And the pry bar is what made those scratches, but that did work. It was a two-person job, and it was a lot of work. So what would be nice is if there was a hole or something drilled through this. I didn't want to do that, although I think it wouldn't be a problem to drill a hole through that so you could stick a pin in it and maybe butt it up against something that's and you know, other part of the suspension over here. Yeah, the shocks are really nice. You can see the adjustment screw is going to be fairly easy to get to. It's pretty dark in there. Fairly easy to get to right here. Just adjustment, reach over the wheel. The top, of course, is underneath the hood. Yeah, overall, I'm actually more impressed than I was when I first opened the package. I have taken it for a quick drive when I first installed it to make sure everything seated correctly and it was all settled before I started the setup. And wow, initial impressions, I only drove it, you know, probably 3 or 4 kilometers, but that is an amazing difference even in that time prior to doing the setup. So I'm really excited to get this out on the road and see how it handles. So okay, if you have any questions, feel free to just leave a comment below, and I'll answer to the best of my ability. Just to give you an idea of time, so I don't do this on a regular basis, and I took my time to make sure everything was done, you know, just as I wanted it to be done. For the actual install of the coilovers, I'm going to say probably 10 hours or so there, and probably another 6 to 7 hours for a whole setup. Now that's not just ride heights, that's corner weights and that. So anyway, very impressed with this kit. I think I made the right choice in going with this kit. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll get back to them to the best of my ability. Okay, thanks, bye-bye.